The second African Climate Summit is going to be held from September 8 to September 10, 2025, here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This major global event is going to be co-hosted by the government of Ethiopia and African Union Commission. This super important global climate summit is going to be held under the theme Accelerating Global Climate Solution, Financing for Africa's Resilient and Green Development. Well, my guest for today is Dr. Adefres Worku. Dr. Adefres Worku is head of Green Legacy Technical Committee. Thank you so much for making time to conduct this interview from your busiest schedule. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Like I said in the beginning, the second African Climate Summit is going to be held here in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, from September 8 to September 10. This major global summit will bring together various head of states and governments, private sectors, business leaders, development partners, and other influential figures. So let me start with the question, why was Ethiopia chosen to host this super important global summit?
Yeah, thank you very much once again for having me. Ethiopia is hosting the second African Climate Summit, and the selection of Ethiopia is really not a kind of free lunch, and that has come because of several factors. And maybe I can mention 2-3 very important factors for why Ethiopia has been chosen to host this very much important summit in Africa. And in fact, the summit, despite it is an African climate summit, but also globally this is going to be a very important coalition or summit. So the first reason, in my understanding, is that Addis Ababa is a diplomatic seat of African Union Commission, and we have been hosting for many years this office so that we are the seat of African Commission. And Ethiopia is also the seat for several UN agencies and also other very important development partners or organizations. For instance, UN ECA is also hosted here in Addis Ababa. And because of this very fantastic infrastructure and the presence of this institution will encourage the African head of state and also the global community to choose Ethiopia to host this very important event. The second reason could be the political will and the leadership of Ethiopia of the climate management. For several decades, I may say that Ethiopia has been a consistent front runner of climate change negotiations. But since recently, Ethiopia is not only negotiator, front runner at a global scale or at a global platform to convince the global community to mitigate climate change, but also Ethiopia has been becoming a country which translated those discussions and those negotiations into action. For instance, if you look at our policies, our climate policies like the CRGE, Climate Resilient Green Growth Strategy, if you look at our NDC, these climate policies are really a very, very comprehensive and ambitious policies that put in a very clean and crystal form that Ethiopia wanted to demonstrate to the global community by reducing its emission very much significantly. For instance, Ethiopia promised to the global community through its NDC, updated NDC, nationally determined contribution, to reduce its emission by 2030 by 68%. And this is a very ambitious target, which have been welcomed by African state of head of state and also by the global partners and the global communities. So the presence of these policies has gave Ethiopia the opportunity to be a potential applicant to host this type of platform, I may say. Like also, if you come to intervention, Ethiopia, for instance, has been changing this narrative of being a victim region. Like whenever we discussed before about climate change in Africa, we consider ourselves as a victim continent, a vulnerable continent. But now Ethiopia, for instance, through implementing this world's largest integrated landscape restoration, the Green Legacy Initiative, that we have been establishing a new narrative which says that we are not only victim, but also we are a solution provider. So Africa, not only a victim to climate change, in fact, that is true, that Africa is very much vulnerable to the impact of climate change, being drought or flood or rainfall variability, and also associated, decline in production and the productivity. We are a victim, that is true, but also Africa has the potential to give a solution to the climate change impact. So now Ethiopia has been, becoming a model country to show to the global community and also that of, African friends, sisters and brothers, by implementing, by designing a large-scale or flagship nature-based solution which contribute locally, regionally, and globally. And this is the Green Legacy Initiative, for instance. Also, if we look at our energy, renewable energy, Ethiopia is still becoming a model for the global community and also that of African countries by constructing, eco-friendly energy source, which is hydro. So that also gives Ethiopia the upper hand to host the second African Climate Summit. And maybe the other very important factor that I may raise is that the political will of the government of Ethiopia to contribute to significantly contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation. In fact, what we have been doing in terms of a vehicle, for instance, by transforming our energy sector, our transport sector, our agriculture sector, and also the nature-based solutions that we have been implementing are not only contributing to our local challenge, but also to contribute to the global challenges. For instance, through the Green Legacy Initiative, restoring the mountains, the degraded mountains of Ethiopia will significantly contribute to the downstream countries because there are many cross-border countries that start in Ethiopia, including the Abai, later on the Blue Nile. Without those nature-based solutions implemented by the political will of the government of Ethiopia, that means that the downstream countries are going to face more challenges or crises because of water scarcity, flood, and so on. So the political will and institutional strength in Ethiopia, which is becoming together to plan and implement actions that contribute to the impact of climate change, has contributed a lot to make the opportunity for Ethiopia to host this very, very important African summit, which has also its significance for the global community.
You have raised enormous important ideas why Ethiopia was selected for this super important global event, like Ethiopia and its capital city Addis Ababa, the political and diplomatic capital of Africa in the world as well, including Africa Union. Lots of continental and global organizations are headquartered here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And Ethiopia's contribution to climate mitigation activities, Ethiopia being a role model for Green Legacy Initiative, and other factors have enabled Ethiopia to be selected to host this major global event, which is going to be held after a couple of days. Thank you for that. The title, the Second Africa Climate Summit, by itself highlights the fact that the discussion, the summit will center on climate. And climate is, such a multifaceted and complex idea. It touches lots of things, almost it touches everything. So what are the top priorities of the Second African Climate Summit, which is going to be held here in Addis Ababa? What are the top agendas?
Yeah, as you said, the main issue of the summit is going to center on negotiating at a continental level and also globally, that the global community needs to come together to cut off its emission so that global warming needs to be stopped or reduced according to the Paris Agreement, according to those targets. But within this, event, that the African nations, head of state, are going to focus on two major thematic areas, I may say. One is the need to accelerate nature-based solution, because climate change, it has already happened, and its impact is real, that it has been undermining the sustainable development of both North and the South countries, be it developed country or developing countries. In fact, the developing countries are the ones which have been, disproportionately affected because of the climate change, despite their contribution to the changing climate is significantly less, and in terms of, in some cases, it is really negligible if we are about to, account our contribution to the global climate change warming. But again, as Africa, we wanted to focus that if we come together and implement nature-based solution, for instance, sustainable management of forest, sustainable management of natural resource, restoration of degraded landscape, restoration and sustainable management of our water bodies. If we are able to transform or transit our energy from, not eco-friendly to a much sustainable and a green energy. And in fact, if we do the same to our cities, our transport system, our agriculture, that means that Africa will become not only a victim, but also, a provider of solution. So in this summit, we wanted to really tell to the global community that we have to scale up and scale out best practices of nature-based solution. For instance, the Green Legacy Initiative. In fact, Ethiopia has been claiming, for instance, because over the last 7 years, Ethiopia is able to plant 47.6 billion seedlings of different species. These are forests, these are agroforests, these are ornamental. And we did this, by mobilizing millions of people annually. And these planted forest species or tree species are going to, sequester millions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere. And also through the Green Legacy, Ethiopia has not only increased its forest cover, for instance, which is going to be very much important measure for climate change mitigation, but also we are able to significantly reduce our deforestation rate. That means that we significantly reduced our emission from the forest and also from the agriculture sector. I mean, these are, nature-based solutions. So with this summit, we are going to, emphasize the acceleration, the support to, replicate and scale up nature-based solution. And these nature-based solutions are a lot. These are integrated intervention. But the Green Legacy Initiative of Ethiopia could be a very good example. It contributes to sustainable natural resource management. It contributes to biodiversity conservation. It contributes to even enhancing access to quality and quantity water. That means that green energy, in fact. And also it contributes to food security. And in fact, it contributes to significantly to the many targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, for instance. And that is also why Ethiopia, for instance, has been claiming to EU, can we consider the Green Legacy Initiative to be, a Pan-African initiative? In fact, African Union Commission had this initiative, very important umbrella initiative called the Pan-African Great Green Wall Initiative. But the Pan-African Great Green Wall Initiative, in fact, at this time only consider a limited number of countries. But if we could expand Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative to be, a Pan-African initiative, so that it will be, a very good nature-based solution. So this is one of the themes to accelerate, the planning, implementation, monitoring, and the reporting of nature-based solution. But the other important thematic area of this summit is also, to go beyond the discussions, to go beyond the negotiations, to enter into action. For instance, we have been saying that the need to walk the talk, because since several decades, the global community has been already discussing the impact of climate change. And we have been also identified, these two very important thematic areas, climate change mitigation and then climate change adaptation. We know the impact of climate change, and we also know about the measures that need to be taken. But where we lagged or where we didn't significantly moved ahead is to plan and implement those intervention or action that contribute to mitigation and also adaptation. So with this summit, the African head of state wanted to really galvanize or consolidate the discussion and the negotiation on these two thematic areas, accelerating nature-based solution and also, to work the talks.
Yeah, Dr. Adefres, I love the way you articulate the idea, walking the talk. So far lots of talks, discussions, speeches, discourse have been delivered, but what remains is action, and you emphasized on the significance of putting effort on actions. So let me go to the third question. The African Climate Summit is, of course, a platform designed to spotlight Africa's unique climate challenge and homegrown solutions and forward-thinking solutions towards climate challenge. Really, Africa has lots of stories that the world needs to hear, right? So in what way will this summit, the second African Climate Summit, will elevate African voice? How African voices are going to be amplified in the summit?
I think this summit will enhance the African voice in 2-3 forms in my understanding. One, now, we have been conducting this second African Climate Summit a few months ahead of COP13. COP13 to be held in Brazil is a very important platform where the global communities, both the emitters and also the victims, come together and discuss about what shall we do and how shall we do it, and then stop the impact of climate change before our planetary Earth will face, more impact than we have been facing now. We have been already facing, a number of challenges. Drought have been displacing millions annually. Flood has been displacing and killing millions and hundreds of thousands and thousands every year. And it has been undermining, the sustainable development and the economy of various countries, and undermining the ambition of countries, particularly that of developing countries, because of those impacts, I may say. So before we go to COP, for instance, the African states are going to underline and craft a very unified position on how to approach the negotiation on at COP13. So this summit that is held in Ethiopia now is going to give the opportunity for African head of state to sit together, discuss the thematic areas and the priorities, agrees on them, and show to the global communities their voice as a very unified position later on when they discuss. That means that later on when we will be participating on high-level conferences, for instance, at COP13 and also in other platforms, we don't speak differently like the Horn of Africa, North Africa, East Africa, South Africa, not like that. Before, we need to talk like that. And there used to be even difference in priorities between 2 countries, 3 countries. But now, through this discussion, we are going to consolidate our agenda, our position, so that we will leave Addis Ababa with a very unified position that we are going to present to the global community when it comes to climate change mitigation and adaptation. Negotiations on climate change are also a very complex process, because we affected the global warming through several years of intervention, and that is not because of a single country, because of many countries. Now also when you talk about the solution, a single country cannot really bring that solution. Every country, being developed or developing country, needs to contribute to the solution of the climate change challenges or crisis. So this comes only through negotiations, so through discussion. And then if African countries come together as one voice, that means that their voice will become stronger and louder, but also, you know, their thematic area or their position will be very clear to the other continents, including the Western countries. That is one thing. The other thing, which I think is also, you know, this summit will also underline that issue that I have mentioned, that Africa is not only a victim continent, but also a potential continent that will give a solution, can be considered as a solution provider. In fact, the continent is a victim, as I already mentioned, but also there are many, you know, African-led initiatives, such as the Green Legacy Initiative and several integrated or green development intervention in other countries, in neighboring countries we know. For instance, Kenya has learned or taken lesson from Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative. They send their high-level delegation to come to Ethiopia, learn from our Green Legacy Initiative. And then Kenya, as a nation, also launched the planting of 50 billion seedlings, because Ethiopia has already, you know, shown to the global community by setting this very ambitious target of tree planting, which is 50 billion seedlings to be planted. And these are a heritage not only for Ethiopia, not only for Africa, but also for the global community. This is a capital asset or no, a capital finance for the global community in terms of climate change mitigation, but also adaptation. So, you know, that also, this summit will also help, you know, the African continent or African head of state to show to the global community that there are initiatives, Africa-led initiative, nature-based solution that need to be supported, to be scaled up, you know, get widened and become, you know, implemented at a scale so that Africa can significantly contribute to the climate change management.
What will be the significance of the summit in promoting African unity? How will the Addis Ababa Declaration, the forthcoming Addis Ababa Declaration, and other key outcomes of the summit will significantly contribute to strengthen continental solidarity and enhance collective influence in global climate negotiations?
Yeah, you brought a very important topic that I would have, you know, touched on it. You know, as I said, negotiation on climate change, particularly on biodiversity conservation, desertification, pollution, are really, you know, very complex matter and need to be, you know, a very close partnership between stakeholders. Particularly in Africa, you know, I remember when we sit on a particular platform, we used to, you know, there were occasions where we, you know, discussed once against each other. Like when Ethiopia promote a particular agenda, maybe other African countries also, you know, consider that Ethiopia's priority not as its own priority, but, you know, then because of these overlapping interests or priorities, our voice was very much undermined, you know, so that we are unable to mobilize the amount of, you know, support that we wanted to get from the global community, you know, since our, you know, participation on those global environmental agendas, be it biodiversity, desertification, climate change, so on and so forth, including poverty. This togetherness for me is not only about climate, but also about economy, also about, you know, political dialogue on how to, for instance, you know, form a more unified, you know, comprehend African leadership at a continental level, so that, you know, it will contribute, it will leave a number of legacy, you know, to strengthen the Africa's unity. Now, Africa used to be together, and also it needs to be really strengthened. Despite we are different countries, we are very much, you know, close countries in terms of economy. For instance, if you look at, you know, the impact of climate change, I mean, we all are very much, similar, like drought affect all African countries, flood affect all African countries. You come to Horn of Africa, for instance, we are very much hydrologically connected countries. So when we sit together and discuss about climate change, about nature-based solution through this summit, that means that we are also discussing about our other common challenges, so that it will really significantly contribute about, the oneness, the unified Africa in various ways. So that this is, something very much important for African Union Commission. It will give to this commission a very strong arm, to more, bridge the gap between our countries, so that rather we will come together and then, we network through road, through market, through technology, through even electricity. For instance, Ethiopia wanted to, once, we are going to produce sufficient amount of electricity, which is, a very important for climate change mitigation and also adaptation. It means that Ethiopia wanted to share its electricity to, the neighboring countries. I mean that this is a togetherness, so that will really a very much important platform to strengthen Africa's unity.
All right. If I get the exact figure, Africa contributes less than 4% for global greenhouse emission, but the continent is hard hit by the impact of global climate change. So this Africa Climate Summit will be quite an opportunity to advocate for climate justice. How will the summit enable African countries to mobilize the developed world, the global north, better to say the global north, to deliver on climate finance commitments?
Climate finance mobilization is really a very challenging form or negotiation. In fact, you hear that there are, trillions of dollars which have been, assigned, for instance, for carbon credit. And in fact, there are also very much important projects that have been, signed bilaterally or multilaterally and implemented by developing countries. For instance, I may mention, some of, the development partners that have been closely working with the government of Ethiopia, supporting sustainable management of natural resource, for instance, forest, through this RED investment program or RED Plus program. There are also support from the development partners to the sustainable land management, to support the agriculture, the energy sector, the health sector, the water sector. In fact, this has been happening in all African countries and also beyond. However, when you compare, to the impact of the climate change, the amount of resources that has been mobilized from the global community, particularly the global south, is really, not at all comparable with the impact that, the developing countries has been facing. That is really, the consequence of climate change is really very much massive, and in many cases it is beyond than a single country to adapt to or to be resilient to those challenges. And then, with this summit, for instance, what we can do is that on one hand, we will show to the global community about our least or meager contribution to the global impact or global warming. But again, we wanted to show to them how much we are becoming vulnerable, how much our sectors, such as the agriculture, the natural resource, the water and the energy, the health, transport, infrastructure, and industry sectors have been affected because of this contribution, long-standing contribution to the global warming. And then we have, been accounting these impacts to show to the global community. So later on, for instance, when Africa go to Brazil to speak to the global community about its vulnerability, now we have going to have, unaccounted and verified, documents and the figures that will show our level of vulnerability to the global community. That is one thing, that we need to really demonstrate the level of our vulnerability. What has climate change does on our agriculture or our forests, on our water and energy and industry. That is one thing. You need to really show to the global community that you are affected and that you are affected in this match. And the second one is we are going to show to the global community to adapt to this impact or to being resilient to this impact, this ongoing impact. We need this amount of investment, so that through this discussion, through this conference, that we are also going to underline how much resource Africa need to implement adaptation strategies or intervention, so that they will be not broken because of drought or because of flood. That is one thing. So that we show to them our vulnerability or the impact, and then we show to the global community the amount of resource we need. And then thirdly, as I said earlier, we need to also demonstrate to the global community that we can plan, implement, monitor, and report intervention or climate actions that will minimize the impact of global warming on African state, and then being resilient, and then also contribute to the global community. For instance, reforesting or afforesting Ethiopia's highland and the lowland and the midland will significantly contribute to also to Africa, not only to Africa, but also to the global community in two ways. One, we will avoid, for instance, additional emission from the agriculture or the forestry sector, but also we will sequester millions of tons of carbon every year from the atmosphere through what we have been doing on our landscape. So by informing those potentials, that Africa can also contribute to the solution to the global community, that we will have a clear position in our discussion with the global partners, so that this platform will really also significantly contribute to shape those discussions and the negotiations.
Mm-hmm. As you said earlier on, Ethiopia was chosen to host this second African Climate Summit, important global climate summit, for its remarkable achievement and success in climate mitigation activities, particularly with its large-scale tree planting campaign and other environmental initiatives that the country undertook so far. So how will the summit help Ethiopia to showcase its success, achievement, and experience in this regard?
Yeah, this is also going to be a very important question. Many countries who have been attending this summit will present their best practices, such as natural resource management, or in the energy sector, transforming the energy sector, transforming the transport sector, could be the agriculture sector or the food processing or the industry sector. There are a number of side events where countries wanted to show to the global community and also other African countries, to learn lesson on how to plan, implement, and report, this climate intervention or climate action. That means that Africa is going to consolidate those nature-based solutions implemented by different African countries that can be consolidated, or where the lesson could be consolidated and shared among other continents, Latin America, Asia, even the developed countries. For instance, we can still take the Green Legacy Initiative of Ethiopia, the GERD we can take into account, or maybe the transport sector that we have been going forward in Ethiopia. how Ethiopia have been, establishing those green industry zones here in Addis Ababa and also in other small cities and towns. Those Africa-led initiative, African country-led nature-based solution will be consolidated, discussed, and narrated, and then, communicated to the global community in a way that, look, Africa, despite its vulnerability to the impact of global warming or climate change, despite its vulnerability to the adjoined landscape degradation, desertification, deforestation, biodiversity loss, scarcity of water in different basins. But again, Africa has been going forward in planning and implementing solution, and those solutions such as the Green Legacy Initiative is a solution to achieve the various targets in global partnership, like protocols, the Paris Agreement, the NDC, and also the SDG, where such an initiative such as the Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative could be communicated by African states once we present, because for instance Ethiopia has organized the Green Legacy Initiative Steering Committee. The different line ministries and organizations has organized a side event to be held on this summit, where we wanted to show to the global community what has happened over the last 7 years, how Ethiopia is really able to mobilize planting 47.6 billion seedlings. Being a developed country, a developing country, how has this been possible for Ethiopia? Because there are many countries which have a question how Ethiopia has be able to plant billions of seedlings in 1 year. This year, in 1 day alone, Ethiopia has planted over 700 million seedlings. Imagine this is only in 12 hours. Now we wanted to show to the global community, as an African community, as an African nation, not only as an Ethiopian, but as a continent, we wanted to show to the global community, look, this is possible. And also without, planning large-scale nature-based solution, we are not going to beat the impact of climate change. That is the message that we wanted to craft and communicate to the global community. So the event, again, will help the African head of state in communicating their position on how those initiative, African-led initiative, have been planned and implemented, and also how it has been benefiting the local community and also the global community, so that the platform is also a place where we will sell what we have done, and where we will sell, where we will market our results, I may say.
Dr. Adefres Worku, Head of Green Legacy Technical Committee, thank you very much for sharing your beautiful insights and perspectives regarding topic of our interview, the Second African Climate Summit, which is going to be held after a couple of days here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Thank you so much for your time, and wishing you a successful time in your future endeavor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Adefres. That was my brief interview with Dr. Adefres Worku, Head of Green Legacy Technical Committee. Hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Many thanks for watching. Bye for now.